Inspired Parenting Radio Show with host Sandy Sedgbeer, where our mission is to inspire conscious parents, families, and educators by bringing you the latest research and thinking on supporting today's highly evolved children to fulfill their potential as healthy, confident, resourceful, and emotionally intelligent individuals.
When it comes to summing up parenting, I don't think I could put it any better than today's guest, Joshua Freedman, who wrote, "Parenting is a delight, except when it's not." It's true. Parenting isn't always fun, especially when the daily grind has left us feeling tired, stressed, overworked, unappreciated, and temporarily incapable of empathizing with anyone's needs but our own. We've all experienced those moments of emotional idiocy when patience fails us and we overreact or miss important clues as to what's really behind our children's behaviour. Moments that usually end up in tears, recriminations, guilt, regret, and a heartfelt if only. If only we'd responded differently. If only we'd been less reactionary, more attentive and supportive. We've all been there. So, how can we learn to be more intelligent with our own emotions and our children's? And how can we teach them the essential skills to be more aware, intentional, and purposeful? The answer, according to Joshua, lies in two extremely important and very powerful words: emotional intelligence. Joshua Freedman is one of a handful of experts in the world with over a decade of full-time experience in the emerging field of emotional intelligence, the author of 5 books about using emotional intelligence at work, school and in life, including the international bestseller At the Heart of Leadership, How to Get Results with Emotional Intelligence. Joshua not only leads the organisation 6 Seconds, which is the world's largest network of emotional intelligence practitioners and researchers, with offices and representatives in over 25 countries, but he's also trained thousands of professionals to use these methods to create positive change. Joshua Freedman, welcome.
Thank you, Sandy.
Joshua, we hear so much today about why emotional intelligence is so important, how it's the biggest predictor of a child's future success and happiness in life. So first, explain to us, what is emotional intelligence?
Well, I loved your introduction, and it made me want to cry thinking about all those times when I've just, missed that opportunity and blown it with my kids. And now I have these, big teenagers. And, I think we all can relate to the emotional idiocy that we sometimes experience. And we overreact or we underreact. Well, emotional intelligence is not doing that. It's, in simple terms, it's being smarter with feelings. Recognizing that our feelings are data. And just like we can use mathematical intelligence to read mathematical data, we can use emotional intelligence to read emotional data. And by the way, just like we can use mathematical intelligence to solve math puzzles, we can use emotional intelligence to solve emotional puzzles, and parenting certainly is an emotional puzzle.
Oh my goodness, it's one of the, well, it is the most difficult job of all, I think. And, the sad thing is there is no training unless we go out and seek it. I mean, it doesn't come as a natural thing, that every parent, in order to have a child, you have to pass this exam. Sometimes I wish that was the case. And I think the thing is, as everybody knows, we tend to get stuck in these patterns of responding and then saying afterwards, "Oh my goodness, I didn't mean to say that, but that sounds exactly like one of my parents."
Oh, yes, it's such a wound. I remember, and I talk about this in the book, I remember as a child just deliberately thinking, I'm never going to do this to my children. And, of course I have.
Of course we have. We always do. I think the key is, how do we learn to get that moment? There's that little moment, and you write about this in your book, Wholehearted Parenting, where there's that gap and we have a choice, but usually we kind of leapfrog that gap and go straight into reaction. How can we stay in that little gap long enough.
Yeah. Well, I think, there's that beautiful quote about between stimulus and response is, let me get the quote. I just like it so much. Do you remember it?
Oh, I was reading it earlier in your book. I think between stimulus, something about there is that a small space.
Yeah.
That's where we have choice, isn't it? Yeah.
And Viktor Frankl talked about it.
Mm.
And he says, here we go, between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom.
Yes, that is beautiful.
I mean, wow. Okay, so first, just recognizing that there is, in fact, that space there. And what's so interesting is, of course, Viktor Frankl didn't have the neuroscience that we have now to know that that's literally biologically true. There is this little moment. It takes about a quarter of a second as we start to interpret a signal, and another quarter second as our brain produces the neurohormones, the emotion chemicals, to react. And then they're released. So there's that magic half second. And then they're released, and they go into our blood, and they affect every living cell in our body. And then the chemicals are absorbed, and they're broken down, and they last for about 6 seconds in total. And that's why our organization is called 6 Seconds. We've all, reacted more quickly than that. The reaction starts faster than 6 seconds, and we've all felt something for longer than 6 seconds. And that's because we recreate, and we create more and more and more. So I think there's two pieces here. One is recognizing that we do, at a chemical level, at a neurological level, we do have a choice. We have this moment where we are interpreting, and just acknowledging that choice exists, I think is really empowering and freeing, and also it creates a real responsibility for us. And then the second thing is this 6 second notion that these emotion chemicals, they're flooding us, and then we're creating more and more. And neuroscientists call this a cascade effect. A little bit multiplies and multiplies and multiplies and multiplies, and pretty soon it's really hard to change the course of the reaction. And so for me, the takeaway is the earlier we can intercede in our automatic reaction, the easier it is for us going to be to press that pause button, extend that little magic half second a little bit longer, and utilize it. And then the last thing is we need to practice. We need to get good at it.
Well, here's the thing. Our children are constantly giving us opportunities to practice.
Yeah,
and
indeed they are.
So many times we miss it.
Yeah. Well, this is a beautiful thing. I was talking to one of the co-author of two of my business books, Max Geeney, and he's also a dad, and he and I were talking about our kids and how interesting it is that they're such great EQ trainers for us. Because we both go around the world speaking to, senior corporate groups and, and talking about this at work. But at home, it's our kids, particularly when they were little, who are really training us. And when we see their reaction didn't go the way we wanted it to, we get feedback. And the feedback, might be a tantrum, it might be a power struggle, it might be a stomping foot, whatever, it might be tears. But if that wasn't what we wanted, then there's feedback to say, okay, wait a minute, I didn't do this in an emotionally intelligent enough way. And let me use that feedback and say, I'm going to try something different.
Well, your organization has been around since 1997, which is, I think, long before the average parent even heard about this thing called emotional intelligence. And you're doing a great job. I mean, you're in so many countries. You've trained thousands of people. You go into business schools. You're everywhere. And it's clear that we need what you have. So,
well, our mission is to support positive change everywhere, all the time, and everywhere, as you said, all over the world. But all the time, I think, is one of the tricky bits, because it's not enough to do this, on a nice, quiet Sunday afternoon when we have some leisure time. Like, when we need to do this is in the moments of challenge. It's on Monday morning when we're trying to get out the door and the kids are late and our spouse lost the car keys and, where is the homework? And what do you mean you forgot your whatever it was? And we're late. That's when we most need this.
Yes. Yeah. And we really need to get this in the muscle. And as you say, practice is one of the best things. So where do we start? Is it just, reading your book, maybe attending some lectures, having it pointed out to us, and having ourselves remember some of those awful moments of guilt and regret, which give us the impetus to do it differently?
So, I'm going to be a terrible businessman here and say, you don't need to buy the book. You don't need to come to our courses.
We do.
We have so many chances to practice this, and actually it's really simple. It's not at all simple to do it consistently. That's the hardest thing ever. But it's really simple to start. And the first step, and we have this 3-step process that we teach, and, lather, rinse, repeat. Over and over again. The 3-step process is tune in, choose, and respond purposefully. So let's just go through those for a second, and we can go into more depth. What we say is be more aware, be more intentional, be more purposeful. Or,
Josh, I'm going to hold you right there. Hold on to those 3 things. We'll be back in a few moments to speak about them. We're going over to a break now. We'll be back in 3 minutes. Please do not go away. You do not want to miss this.
You're listening to OTR-FM, part of the IOM radio network.
As difficult as it is to believe, there are places in Africa where human traffickers sell albino children and their body parts for use in magic rituals. Humanity Healing International is actively working in Uganda to change this paradigm. The Albino Rescue Project finds albino children who are at risk and places them in safe schools and environments where they can learn and grow free from fear. To learn more or to sponsor a child, visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
Do you have time to read that inspiring book or that blog post you've been meaning to get to? In your busy world, how do you improve yourself and keep your life going? I'm Lisa Kay, and my Between Heaven and Earth radio show can transform your life just by listening. Be uplifted with inspiring topics, positive stories, and ideas that really work. Between Heaven and Earth Radio is conscious living for your soul, every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time.
Being a radio host on IOM FM allows you to build your show on a rich platform with the power of the internet to fulfill your outreach goals and connect with a very specialized and global online audience, unlimited by time and distance. OMTimes Radio will provide you with web relevance, a recognizable conscious brand, and with the standard of excellence that has accompanied every single OMTimes endeavor. Host your show with OMTimes Radio Network. Join Elliot Jollish, the business therapist, each Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern for the Elliot Jollish Hour, as he interviews business experts on your behalf. And you're invited to email your business questions to questions@ecjgroup.com for answers, live, on air every Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern on the Elliot Jollish Hour.
You're listening to OTR-FM, part of the IOM radio network.
Emotional intelligence in ourselves and in our children. Josh, just before the break, You raised 3 very important points. Please continue.
All right, so we frequently call these 3 steps: know yourself, choose yourself, give yourself. Know yourself is about tuning in and being more aware of your feelings. Choose yourself is about pressing that pause button, using that space, and saying, I don't need to react. I actually have a lot of choices. And then give yourself, well, where do you want to go? And I think this is just such a beautiful question to think about as parents. You know, what is it that we want to give to our children? What is of ourselves that we really want to give to our children? What is our purpose in being parents? And to what extent are we using these moments that we're choosing? How can we use those moments to choose more intentionally to step towards that purpose? And that's a big question, but when we practice this process, no, choose, give, no, choose, give, no, choose, give, we can do it very, very quickly.
How long do you think, on average, it takes someone to really begin to get this so that it becomes a default position?
Well, I wish I had figured it out. I mean, I'll tell you, I was teaching emotional intelligence all over the world, and then I thought I was getting kind of good at this, and then I had kids. And it was really a humbling experience for me. What I can say is that today I get it right a greater percentage of the time than I did 10 years ago. And I think I recover more quickly. So to me, that's quite successful. I don't, and I wish that I could say to you, oh yeah, I've got it dialed now, Sandy. I'm just Mr. Emotional Intelligence, but it's just not. My kids will tell you. In fact, sometimes they say to me, oh, nice job, Mr. Emotional Intelligence.
Have you found, though, that by practicing it so much with them, that they are naturally more emotionally intelligent?
Yeah, this is a really interesting, tough question, of course, because I don't have a control group. I'll practice with one child and not the other. What I can say is I see in both of my kids a huge emotional intelligence strength, although I also see challenges. And what I think is we have, by practicing these skills, by talking about these things, we have had a lot of opportunities for good conversations, and they have a lot of assets. Now, mine are both teenagers right now, and so there's a lot of rejecting of that.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm hopeful that they'll kind of come back around in a few years. And when my daughter was younger and she would feel stressed, she would ask me, what can I do? And I would teach her some different techniques. We could talk about that later. And she would try them out, and and it was very easy to talk about. And now that she's 16, she just says, I don't want to talk about it.
But she will come back to it, and everything you've taught her will stay there. And I guess when you become the grandfather and watch her as a parent, you will see the fruits of your labor.
I am so looking forward to that.
One of the things that became very clear when I was reading your book, Wholehearted Parenting, is that one of the, starting places has to be with us understanding about emotions. They're not the same as feelings, and emotions aren't good and bad. So say a bit more about that.
This is a radical idea. I mean, everybody talks about negative emotions and bad emotions. I feel bad. I have a bad feeling about this. But what if we just got rid of that idea? And we just said, you know what? I mean, we don't say, the numbers 3 and 7 are bad numbers. We shouldn't use them. Right?
Yeah.
They're just numbers. They're data. They mean something. What if we treated emotions in the same way? And we just said, we have emotions for a reason. And, if you're religious, God gave them to you for a reason. If you're not religious, you evolved them for a reason. We have emotions for a reason. So what if we just think about them as something that's there to help us survive and thrive. And our job is to learn to read that data. And there's data in terror, there's data in jealousy, there's data in rage, and of course there's data in joy and delight and wonder and love. And we could just sort of step away from this judgment of ourselves and others. I shouldn't feel that way. Oh, you shouldn't cry. I can just instead say, oh, that's interesting. Something's happening. And one of my colleagues, Marilyn Jorgensen, who's a wonderful teacher of emotional intelligence and worked with little kids for many years, she has this phrase, oh, it looks like you're having big feelings. Isn't that beautiful?
That is lovely.
No, and it's just neutral. It's just they're big feelings, so something big must be happening. And when your child is having a full-out, 100-mile-an-hour tantrum, something big is happening. And from her or his perception, and this is really important, emotions are about perception, not about reality, or not about facts as we read them. From his or her perception, something big is happening. And that's why he or she is having a big reaction.
Yeah. I mean, so often we teach our children to stuff the emotions down. Oh, you fell and hurt yourself, don't cry. I'll make it better. We just gloss over them as if they're not important. And I think you're absolutely right. You say in the book that sometimes just saying to yourself, I am angry, has the power to dissipate the feeling.
There's some wonderful research about that just naming feelings begins to reduce our reactivity. And I think, for myself, I can tell you, I still find feelings a little overwhelming and difficult sometimes, but I used to be scared of feelings. They just seem so random to me and so volatile and so out of control. And big feelings, I just would prefer to avoid them. So realizing that there's a logic to feelings and naming them is the way to start to understand them. Oh, I know what disappointment is. That's when you're sad and you're mad. And you have that feeling because sorrow means that something you care about you're losing. And anger means someplace you want to go is blocked. So disappointment is this combination of being blocked from something you care about. Oh, I get it.
You say that feelings don't just happen, there's logic behind them, and there are rules. And that if we can apply this, then it gives us some insight and we become less afraid of the feelings. Tell us about these 3 rules.
Well, one of the rules is that emotions can be more or less intense. And, it sort of sounds obvious when you say it that way, right? But emotions can be more or less intense. And as we experience an emotion, we are probably going to start out with a relatively small amount of it. And then as the stimulus continues, it will probably grow. Another is that emotions combine, and that we can have a feeling that's a combination of different emotions, like disappointment is an example. There are a lot of different theories about this, but I like to think of sort of basic emotions like anger and fear and sorrow, and then they combine into more complex feelings like disappointment and frustration and worry and excitement. And start to see, what is this made of? And another important point is that emotions influence our thinking. That's what they're there for. They motivate us and they help us pay attention. And so some feelings cause us to focus our attention and narrow our focus towards problems. And some feelings expand our attention. And that's part of our protection system. And then they motivate us to move towards, or they motivate us to move away.
You say that there's a difference between emotions and feelings. How do you define that difference?
Well, I was interviewing a bunch of experts on emotions about this, and one of them said to me, I don't care. I thought, you have to care. And he said, what we're doing here is we're putting a cognitive label on something that's fundamentally a felt experience. And, I do think it's interesting to think about this. And for me, again, as a pretty logical person, understanding emotion and feeling and mood as different things helps me to make sense of it. But I do want to say that the most important thing isn't this sort of cognitive framework. The most important thing is just tune into it. But if you're like me and you're kind of geeky and you want to get into a little more of the science, I would just simply say it's about time and focus. So an emotion is an immediate physiological response to a specific stimulus. And then it starts to integrate into our brains and bodies. It becomes what is technically called more cognitively saturated. So we start to integrate that emotion. It literally physically changes all of the living cells in our bodies. And we feel it. And then that might not be tied to one specific stimulus. There could be multiple things that are going on that are kind of creating that particular feeling state. And then mood is a little later, and it's a little more general. And we've kind of brought a whole bunch of different signals into our brains and bodies, and created a kind of lasting status. And mood is heavily influenced by a lot of external things like the weather or the lighting, by other people, by what you ate yesterday, by exercise. All those affect your mood. And then your mood becomes the filter through which you're interpreting the next experiences. Let me give you just a simple example. That sounds so esoteric. But just think about, at 5 o'clock.
I'm going to have to stop you right there. This is full of cliffhangers, isn't it? Which is good, because people are going to want to come back after the break. We'll be back in a few moments. Don't go away. Yes.
This is OTR-FM, part of the IOM radio network.
OMTimes magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OMTimes, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
This is Terry Van Horn, and I want to invite you to join me for my weekly radio show, Healing Light, on OMTimes Radio, every Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. On Healing Light, we want to bring love, light, and blessings into your world. You can find out more about us at www.healinglightonline.com. Blessings.
Being a radio host on IOM FM allows you to build your show on a rich platform with the power of the internet to fulfill your outreach goals and connect with a very specialized and global online audience, unlimited by time and distance. OMTimes Radio will provide you with web relevance, a recognizable conscious brand, and with the standard of excellence that has accompanied every single OMTimes endeavor. Host your show with OMTimes Radio Network.
Hi, this is Sylvia Henderson, intuitive life coach and energy healer. Are you ready to elevate and rise way above your normal? Be sure to listen to my show, Intuitive Transformations, on OMTimes Radio, Sunday evenings at 9 p.m. Eastern. Get the inspiration you need to transform your life.
You're listening to OTR-FM, part of the IOM radio network.
Welcome back. I'm Sandy Sedgbeer, and I'm speaking with Joshua Freedman, author, emotional intelligence expert, and CEO of 6seconds.org. Josh, I hope you held that, because I am agog.
Well, so I said, I wanted to tell you what that esoteric idea about moods and feelings and emotions meant in a practical term. And it's 5 o'clock, and your kids have been home from school for a while, and they're, 6 and 8 years old, and it's been a long day for all of you. And you find yourself just really being irritated with them. So what's going on? Well, a big part of what's going on is that you're all in this mood. There's this physical state that you're all experiencing. And you're sort of carrying a lot of different emotions and feelings from the day, and it's creating this mood that you're in, and you're hungry, and you're tired, and you haven't had a lot of decompression time. And you're experiencing that, and your kids are experiencing that. And so that in that mood, a little thing gets amplified. And remember, our feelings direct our attention to opportunities and threats. And we're interpreting. It's not based on external reality. It's based on our perception. And so little Susie, sees something. She sees her brother take out his book, and she doesn't have a book. And she interprets that as something like, you're not taking care of me, Mom, because you didn't give me the book that I wanted. And off we go, right? And Mom's interpreting that, Susie's whining as, like Susie is being a much bigger pain than she should be. And Mom gets more upset than she might otherwise. So everybody's kind of, the sensitivity knob has been turned up by this mood, which is physical, mental, and emotional. And one of the things to do about that, okay, so it's great to know that, but what do we do with that is we recognize that whatever's going on for us, it's probably also going on for our kids. When we're tired and hungry, they're probably tired and hungry. When we're feeling impatient and just, out of rope, there's a good chance that they're feeling that too. And by the way, when we're feeling really frustrated about something and we want to scream at them, guess what they're probably feeling?
Yeah. Well, children are brilliant mirrors, aren't they? And we wonder sometimes where they get some of this behavior from.
From your mother. Oh,
yes.
Wait, no, I didn't say that.
Yes, I mean, I see it all the time when I can gauge how good a parent I was when I watch my daughter with her children. And it's very easy for me to be critical. But okay, so let's say that, I've read your book, and it is a brilliant book, by the way. You make it so accessible and so much fun with all of the little stories that you tell, and every single parent can relate to. So it really is a very accessible book. Let's say I've read your book and I really want to develop my own emotional intelligence and be able to model that to my grandchildren. Mm-hmm. Where would I start?
Well, you have already started, but we could take another step by saying, looking at the moments where you're interacting with them and you really feel like you're doing a good job. We could start with the ones where you feel like you're doing a bad job, but let's start with the ones where you're feeling like you're doing a good job. And let's notice what kind of choices you're making and why you're making those choices. What are you feeling? What options are you creating, and why are you responding the way you respond in those situations? And then we could contrast that to the times when it's not going so well, and what are your feelings and choices, and what purpose are you feeling in those moments? So kind of tuning into that and recognizing there's a lot of story to read here, just by noticing, saying, okay, that's interesting. And remember, we're not going to judge about this being good or bad. We're just going to say that's interesting. The founder of our organization created a program called Self-Science, And in self-science, it was really how we got started. And Daniel Goleman wrote about self-science as one of the models of how you teach emotional intelligence. And that led us to get a lot of calls from people saying, how do you do that? Anyway, in self-science, the notion is to be a scientist about yourself. And so as a scientist about yourself, you're noticing yourself in these moments where it's going well and where it's not going well. And you're saying, oh, that's interesting. And you're being curious. Noticing your feelings and noticing your patterns. And we haven't really talked much about patterns. You mentioned it earlier. But we all learn patterns of ways of reacting. And what I would encourage you and everybody else to do, and myself to do, is to start being a detective, to be a scientist of observing and saying, what pattern am I following? And a pattern goes like this. When stimulus, I, typical reaction. So, for example, one of mine is, when I feel overwhelmed, I withdraw. And as a parent, what that looks like is things start getting hectic. You know, it's that 5 o'clock thing happening, and I notice myself in my office with the door closed. And I think, wait a minute, I'm missing, this isn't one of the only times I am around my kids, I'm missing it. That pattern might not be serving me. And every pattern has costs and benefits. There's some benefits to it. I'm following that pattern. When I feel overwhelmed, I withdraw. I'm following that pattern to protect myself, but it has costs too. So the first step is noticing the patterns and saying, oh, look, I'm doing that again. How interesting. Again, not good or bad, because as soon as we start judging, then we're going to stop observing. So noticing our patterns. When I feel overwhelmed, I withdraw. When I feel guilty, I attack. When I feel out of control, I tell people what to do. And they're not all, I mean, those are all sort of dysfunctional patterns. You know, some patterns might be, when I feel frustrated, I start asking questions, or when I feel hurt, I share that, or when I see somebody else is upset, I listen. So stimulus and typical reaction. And then as we start to notice those patterns, we can start seeing where they're coming up. And by the way, it's really easy to see our own kids' patterns first. So you think about your grandchildren. You know, what is their typical pattern when they think somebody's, or they're not getting what they want? Or what's their pattern when they think somebody is excluding them? You know, and it's really easy to see, oh, yes, they always do that. Mm-hmm. We do the same for ourselves. Well, what's my pattern? What's my typical reaction in these little moments? And then, do you have any options? Are there any other possible ways to respond? When I feel overwhelmed, I withdraw. Is that the only choice that I have? Well, of course not. I mean, there are lots of options. But in the moment, I might have trouble thinking of it. So the trick is to say, all right, well, is there something else I could try? All right, well, next time I'm going to try this. And it's just a little, it's a science experiment. I'm going to notice it, and I'm going to try altering one variable at a time.
Seems to me that time out is something that parents need more than children.
Yes.
Yeah.
I remember one time when my son was little, and he was very angry, and he really didn't like time out, and it was almost like we had to get into a physical battle to like taking him into his room. And my wife and I said, well, okay, let's try something different. And we said, okay, I don't like the way things are going. I'm going to take a time out now. And we would go into our room and close the door. I remember one time I came home and he was banging on the door with his little wooden hammer because his mother was taking a time out. But and for years there was like a dent from his, 3-year-old tantrum. But, yeah, I think we need time out.
Yeah.
It's a great message to give our kids.
It is. It is. I mean, I think one of the biggest challenges that we face is that we have these expectations. And when the expectations are not met, we don't have a backup plan. Mm-hmm. We kind of go into a spin and something's wrong and we judge it badly and then we react accordingly.
And sometimes it's even not, it's like sometimes kids will ask us a question or they'll tell us something, and it's a great moment to say, I want to think about that. And if you think that, in all of our responses we're teaching our children, what a great thing to teach our children is that when things are complicated, you take time to think.
Yes. Yeah.
You say, I'm upset about this, and I just want to think about it for a few minutes. Or, wow, that's a really tough question. I want to think about it. I'm going to go for a little walk, and I'll come back to you. Or, gosh, you know what? I need 24 hours. I'm going to talk to your mom, and we're going to think about this, and I'll come back to you with my answer. But most things, there's not really a rush for us to respond in most situations with our kids.
Well, no, but it's our expectation of ourselves. I am the wise person here. I'm the adult. I should know the answer, or I should always be in control. But you're raising a very good point, because one of the things that is very easy to forget is what are the lessons I mean to teach, and what are the other lessons that I'm conveying. And you give some great examples related to homework. We think we're trying to teach one thing, we're actually teaching something entirely different. These are all patterns, again, that we need to get out of. What can 6 seconds do to help me as somebody who's very interested in identifying my patterns and developing my emotional intelligence?
I want to tell you a tiny story about the other lesson, and then I'll answer this other question, which is I first saw this so clearly when I was a teacher, and I was talking to one of my students. I was a middle school teacher, and he was 13, and he and his dad and I were talking, and he shared this memory of when he was like 6 years old and his dad was teaching him to swim.
I'm sorry, Josh, but you've done it again. You're really good at this. Hold that story. We'll be back in a couple of minutes.
You're listening to OTR-FM, part of the IOM radio network.
The number one reason girls drop out of school in sub-Saharan Africa is lack of access to feminine hygiene products. The Pads for Schoolgirls Project, an outreach of Humanity Healing International, is changing this paradigm by setting up sewing programs at schools, teaching girls a vocational skill, while producing the reusable pads that help keep them attending classes. The girls pay it forward by making and giving pad kits to other girls in need. To learn more, visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
Hi, this is Angela Levesque, host of Entanglement Radio. Join me Wednesdays at 12 p.m. Eastern for inspiring conversations with visionaries in spiritual science and conscious healing. Entanglement Radio, Wednesdays at 12 p.m. Eastern. Transcendent talk for the conscious mind.
Host your show on IOM FM, the radio network of OMTimes Media, one of the more recognized brand names in the conscious community, and is backed by the extensive marketing reach of OMTimes. Hosting a show on IOM FM immediately connects you with our extensive dedicated community.
Hi, this is Sylvia Henderson, intuitive life coach and energy healer. Are you ready to elevate and rise way above your normal? Be sure to listen to my show, Intuitive Transformations, on OMTimes Radio, Sunday evenings at 9 p.m. Eastern. Get the inspiration you need to transform your life.
You're listening to OTR-FM, part of the IOM radio network.
Welcome back. I'm Sandy Sedgbeer, and you're listening to the Inspired Parenting Show. And my guest is Joshua Freedman. Josh, I can't wait to hear that story.
So this boy was remembering this when his dad was teaching him to swim, and his dad remembered this. It was this great moment, and I saw you, really being able to do this. And the son remembered his dad basically throwing him in the water and feeling really abandoned by his dad. The son remembered as being this really scary experience. And I thought, how interesting that, these two people saw this experience in such different ways. And, of course that's obvious that happens in our lives, but just thought, wow. No, I didn't have kids yet at the time. But when I did have kids, I kept thinking of that story. And I kept thinking about, I wonder how my son is going to remember this. And what I realized is there's the lesson we mean to teach, and there's the other lesson. And the other lesson is usually conveyed not so much by what we say, but how we say it. The other lesson is conveyed by the energy that we're putting out. The other lesson is conveyed by our emotion. And when we're feeling stressed or frustrated, probably we're going to be teaching another lesson than we mean to teach.
Yeah, for sure. I think we can all relate to that. I mean, the things that I know that I carry the most guilt about, my kids don't even remember, but they remember something else that I've kind of, never even occurred to me that they would have an issue with that. We do need to be a lot more vigilant about how what we do and say and how we behave affects others. That is the heart of empathy, isn't it?
And that our choices, so remember I said be more aware, be more intentional, be more purposeful. So be more aware. You're making choices. You're making choices about your thoughts, feelings, and actions. Be more intentional. You have different choices that you can make. Be more purposeful. Well, recognize that those choices matter. Those choices have an impact. And often you don't know what it is. I did ask my kids, I was really scared to do this, but I did ask my kids a couple of years ago, what was the biggest mistake that we made as parents? I wasn't brave enough to say that I made as your dad, that we made as parents. And I was really relieved that their answers, like they didn't remember the things that I was remembering, or at least they didn't talk about it.
Interesting. Well, we don't have a lot of time, unfortunately. I could speak to you for hours because there are so many notes I've made on your book, but we just don't have that time. One thing that many, many parents agonize over is discipline. And most feel that they've got to, retain that control, and they've always got to discipline if it's called for. Tell us some strategies that you would advocate.
Well, I think it's very important that you're active and engaged as a parent, and that you have clear boundaries, and that sometimes it's fine to let the boundaries go. So if you have strong, clear boundaries and you say, you know what, it doesn't matter today, that's fine. Where you get into trouble is with parents who just seem to, the boundary is there's always an excuse for the behavior. So I would say, this is old advice, but pick your battles, and you don't have to fight about everything. You can let some things go. I think timeouts are unreasonable. They're a reasonable place to start, but you don't have to stop there. And the most powerful thing that I learned and I talk about this in the book, when my daughter was little, we would have an incident, and then she wouldn't talk about it. And this is just great advice, again, from the founder of our organization. She said to me, why don't you try just saying to her, let me know when you're ready to talk. And you know what, Sandy, I thought that my daughter was not wanting to talk about things because it was a power struggle. What I've learned now is that my daughter is a person who's very perfectionistic, and she's very analytical. And when she was, 3, 4, 5 years old, and I said, well, let's talk about what just happened, she couldn't talk about it because she hadn't figured it out. She was upset about her behavior or our interaction. And so this turned out to be just such beautiful advice for me to say, okay, take a break, and when you're ready, let's talk about it.
Brilliant advice, absolutely. Because they need time to process it before they can talk about it.
And by the way, we do too. And
yes.
then the next step is, okay, well, let's talk about what happened. And what choices did you make, and what choices did I make? And what choices did your brother make? And I think that's great language to start looking at the fact that we're all making choices, and our choices sometimes have consequences we like, and sometimes they have consequences we don't like. And that, I just think that's so empowering. Okay, so you chose to do this, and I chose to do this, and you chose to do this, and I chose to do this. And how did that work out? I don't really like the way it worked out. Do you? Well, what could we try differently next time? It's a learning conversation, again, with this kind of self-science attitude.
Yeah, I think it's also important to acknowledge when you've been wrong. I jumped to a conclusion. I said something I didn't mean to say, and model that too.
Yeah, I made the choice to raise my voice and not listen to you. For example, I've definitely made that choice sometimes with my kids.
Oh, yes.
And I am not somebody who thinks, we should always be, I think sometimes it's appropriate to raise our voice. I think sometimes it's appropriate to be directive. I think sometimes it's appropriate to express strong feelings of love and of anger. And again, it's part of that boundary setting. But I think it's important to do it intelligently and intentionally instead of just reacting.
Yes. And I think, as you point out again in the book, that it's important to understand why sometimes behaviour problems occur. And, the child could simply be tired. They could be hungry. They could have had a bad day. They could be feeling lonely. There could be all, kinds of reasons behind a behaviour that we're not seeing.
And I tend to take it personally. And what in life is more personal than your own children? So of course we take it personally. But just saying, oh, you know what, maybe he's upset and it has nothing to do with me.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, again, it's just, again, it's the curiosity. It's just opening up more possibilities of exploring what's going on.
So tell us about, your book, Wholehearted Parenting, How to Use Emotional Intelligence to Create More Peace, Collaboration and Joy, is published by 6 Seconds. What does 6 Seconds offer the average parent?
Well, first of all, I'll just put in a pitch here to say, go to 6seconds.org and search for the book, and you can get a free excerpt. On 6seconds.org, there's tons and tons of articles. We're a not-for-profit organization, and we really just believe in giving information away. In addition, we publish training materials and books. We publish assessments for children and adults and schools and corporations. And we teach people how to use our methodology. So we do certification training for people who are interested in training and working with others. And then we have some free e-learning courses, and we have some paid courses as well. And we have a free e-learning course for parents, and we have a paid course for parents who want to go further. We also do coaching, and we train coaches. We have a coach certification program. And so for people who want to practice emotional intelligence for themselves and their families and their own lives, we have resources for that. And for people who are saying, you know what, this whole emotional intelligence thing, I want to make that more of my work and be a practitioner and a change maker to bring more emotional intelligence into the world, we have lots and lots and lots of ways for you to do that.
So somebody could come to you, they could get certified, and then they could start their own business in a sense.
Yeah, absolutely. We have people inside companies, and we have independent people. We have parenting coaches, and we have people inside huge corporations who are doing this inside their companies.
You've been doing this work with 6 Seconds for a number of years, haven't you?
Yeah, we started the organization in 1997, and I'm one of the founders. And it's been such an amazing journey, and I had no expectation that here we would be in 2016 with representatives and offices in 25 countries and 7 psychometric assessments that we publish, and this just astounding community of people who are committed to creating a more emotionally intelligent world, each of us starting with ourselves.
Wow. I mean, isn't it true that from little acorns, great oak trees grow, that you can achieve so much? And I know that you have a goal for, 2 billion people?
we'll start with one.
Okay, be modest.
We want 1 billion people practicing emotional intelligence. And what that means is, again, everywhere all the time, in these small moments of our lives, taking this pause to think, what am I feeling? What are my options? What do I truly want? What's my purpose? And that little process, if 1 billion people were doing that several times a day, think about how we would connect and collaborate and solve problems. We could create just incredible collaboration and prosperity and peace.
That would be amazing. How will you know when you have that many people practicing it?
Well, we have an algorithm, actually, and we are going to develop the next version of it. We're working on already. We have community groups around the world that meet, and we have what we call network leaders that are forming circles in their communities. And then we have these online activities, and we have webinars, and we have these assessment tools. And so we use the data from all of those activities to calculate how many people in our community are practicing. And it's well over 1 million so far.
Wow. Well, Joshua Goodman, it's really been a pleasure to speak with you. It's always a pleasure to do this show, but I've had so much fun and learned so much from you and from your book. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for this incredible mission you're on.
Thank you, Sandy.
I look forward to speaking with you again in the near future, Joshua.
Bye.
Bye-bye. And again, that's www.6seconds. That's all for this week. The Inspired Parenting Radio Show is brought to you by InspiredParentingMagazine.com. I'm Sandy Sedgbeer. Thanks for being with me today. And don't forget, that book is called Wholehearted Parenting.